So it is Monday, January 27th, and here are the three big stories that we need to focus on. Actually, as I was going to get started with this, I just happened to stumble over Kaya Kallas, who was explaining what her agenda for the day was, and it happened to dovetail pretty nicely with what I wanted to focus on. So let's hear what she's saying that she's focusing on as a foreign minister at the EU.
Good morning, everybody. So yesterday we had a good evening with Belarusian leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. We were talking about the sham elections that happened in Belarus, and of course we are standing with the Belarusian people. Belarus is still high on the European agenda. Today in the morning we will have a discussion over hybrid threats. We see things happening in the Baltic Sea. We see hybrid action all around Europe. We need to raise awareness. We need to discuss what more can we do in order to avoid this.
And so when we're talking about hybrid threats, we're talking about things like cutting the undersea cables, which again happened, that there was an attempt at that. So
then we have a discussion on Ukraine. I expect a decision to roll over the sanctions we have. And then, of course, it is good that we discuss what.
And that was approved, and we'll explain how it was approved. And yeah, you want to wait and see this.
More can we do? Putting pressure on Russia to end this war. It's also good that President Trump has put the pressure on Russia to say that it's in their hands to end this war. And
the economy is going to be the way to do that. Okay, so that's her start. Now she goes into other things like Syria and Gaza. But yeah, this is where we're going today. So let's talk about these things. So Swedish authorities seized the vessel suspected of damaging the cable in the Baltic Sea. We talked about this yesterday. Reportedly, the vessel is Vezhen, a ship under the flag of Malta. Now it's a Bulgarian flag, but it's under the flag of Bulgarian ship, but it's under the flag of Malta. It left the Russian port of Ust-Luga a few days earlier and was between Gotland and Latvia when the cable was damaged. So it's not like how. I think you have to be kind of boneheaded at this point to be doing this sort of thing, because it's not like they can't spot you and track where you are by your responder or satellites or that sort of thing. And yet people keep doing this, these captains. Swedish authorities boarded a Maltese flag ship, Vezhen, seized in connection with the latest breach of cables running along the bottom of the Baltic Sea to begin an investigation. On the published photo of the seized ship, a heavily damaged anchor is visible. Vezhen is owned by a Bulgarian shipping company, Navigation Maritime Bulgaria. The vessel has departed from the Russian port of Ust-Luga, and here's the ship, and the anchor does clearly appear to be damaged. Okay, so let's turn our attention to big story number 2. So this was Lukashenko's election yesterday, and I talked about that at some length. And then, so this is really interesting. Steve Rosenberg from the BBC was explaining, or showing a little bit of his questions to Belarusian President Lukashenko, and you want to hear what he has to say.
Alexander Lukashenko could afford to smile. In a staged, managed election, he was guaranteed victory. This you'd expect to see at a polling station. But not what happened next. With voting ongoing, in a room next door, candidate Lukashenko gave a 4.5-hour press conference live on TV.
4.5-hour press conference, and he thought he was a big guy for even allowing Steve Rosenberg to be in there asking his questions. Well, it didn't matter. It's not like he wasn't going to win the election here. But when he's in these press conferences, it's pretty funny to see him say things like, and this wasn't the one where he said this, but at a previous press conference, he was saying, they were asking him about foreigners watching, monitoring the elections, the polling. He says, well, look, if they choose that they don't want to come, that's their business. They don't have to come. Like, if they chose to come, they would have a whole different problem set, though. So, okay, at any rate, let's keep going.
How can you call this a democratic election, I ask, when all your main rivals are either in prison or in exile?
Some are in prison, and some are in exile. But you're here. Everyone has the right to make their own choice. That's democracy.
Wait, their own choice is prison or exile? Okay.
Не должны никому закрывать рот.
You said recently that people in Belarus should be allowed to say what they think and not have their mouths shut. So why not let your opponents out of jail?
Prison is for people who have opened their mouths too wide and have broken the law.
Prisons for people who have opened their mouths too wide. Okay, that's what his democracy looks like. It's not a democracy in any way, shape, or form, but they put the veneer of a democracy on. And I haven't seen the people of Belarus rising up like they tried to do in 2020. And if they do, I'll certainly show that. But I mean, there was a protest yesterday in Warsaw, but doing it in Minsk would have been a different story.
That's only natural. What? Don't you have prisons in Britain and America?
The other candidates were more like spoilers than serious challengers. One actually supported Mr. Lukashenko. Another was full of praise for him.
Довольно странно.
Strange election, I say. The last election in 2020 was followed by a brutal crackdown on protesters.
Yeah, but I don't know that we're going to see that this time because of the last experience. Although, if they took the Georgian kind of path, they would be out there for endless days moving forward. The Georgians are still protesting, as I understand. Okay, let's move on to the next little bit about this. Jake Bro posted this. Lukashenko had another rigged election and decided to give himself 87% of the vote. Why just 87%? Well, let's stop for a second. If in the West, any politician had 87 to 13, it would be like we'd know something's not right. Like that just doesn't happen. If a presidential election went that way, that's okay. But they think, well, look, 87, I got so much. Because Putin's rigged election back in March gave himself 88%. Lukashenko was now allowed to outshine the boss. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it is an interesting theory about just why they got the numbers that they got. Okay, representatives of Hungary have blocked a joint appeal by European Union countries not to recognize the presidential elections in Belarus. Yeah, so Hungary and Slovakia, either of them could have blocked this, and Hungary was certainly doing that. Now, Hungary, Orban was also, they were also dealing with, and Kaya was talking about this in the first video about whether they're going to continue the sanctions extension on Russia. There will be sanctions. The foreign ministers of 27 EU countries have agreed to extend sanctions against Russia. Now, they have to be united on this, and so Orban was going to extract his pound of flesh for it. What's his pound of flesh? The EU provided Hungary with guarantees for its energy security in exchange for its approval on the sanctions extension. So he's essentially acting like a mob boss, getting his demands in order to go along with the sanctions extension on Putin. Okay, so that's where they are. Now, let's turn to our third big story, which is the Russian economy. Russia's largest clothing maker, Gloria Jeans, shutters 2 major factories, citing massive worker losses to the war in Ukraine. Company chairman confirms tech limitations and personnel outflow as key factors. So the hits keep coming. Here's a little plot twist. Russia hid half its war costs in forced bank loans. Now with 21% interest rates crushing businesses, Moscow financial scheme could end the war before missiles do. And that's why the Trump method of putting more pressure on the economy rather than worrying about escalation, it looks like it might have some promise. Okay, here's another. Russian economy faces threat of large-scale bankruptcies for more than 20% of manufacturing and defense industry enterprises. The burden of interest payments on profit at the end of 2024 was at a risky level, exceeding 2/3 of pre-tax profit. That's a significant thing. A year ago, the share was half as much, according to the Center for economic analysis and short-term forecasting. The companies in the investment technological core of the economy are in the most difficult position. According to experts, the anti-leaders are transport engineering and military-industrial complex. Other analysts also warn of other economic surprises. Quote, we expect mass bankruptcies of companies. The economy is unbalanced. The reason is the lack of coordination between actions of the central bank and the government, according to the chief economist, Andrei Kleppak. Okay, companies just need to survive to provide working capital and pay salaries. Some, unfortunately or fortunately, have state defense order, but now it is criminal liability for not fulfilling it. So they'll take out a loan at a rate of 20 to 30% so as not to go to jail. So they personally can go to jail if they don't fulfill these orders. So they're taking these terrible, ruinous loans in order to get this done. So they don't go to jail personally, and that could destroy the businesses. So that's where the Russian economy is. It's really, really, really in bad shape. Now, this last article, or this last bit, is just a post from Igor Shushko, and I haven't been able to confirm this elsewhere. So I'm looking at other news, and I just don't see it. But Shushko has been a very valid and trustworthy source all the way through, and I just thought it was just freaking funny. In Russia, when the deputy minister of digital development is caught in a restaurant accepting cash bribe, it's a disgrace, not because we have corruption, but because we have the digital development deputy minister is taking the bribe in cash. Like, you know that there are like 1,000, 10,000, 13,000 cryptocurrencies that exist. This is how many types of cryptocurrency? Over 13,000 exist due to the open source nature of blockchain technology. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's only hundreds that you could trust, but the deputy minister for digital development is caught taking a cash bribe. That's an interesting statement on what he actually believes about what he does. All right, that's all that I have here, my friends. Let's stop with this with Darth Putin. Anyone who wants to negotiate a deal with me can ask Prigozhin how the deal I made with him worked out. Good thought. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.